Welcome, everyone. Typically, when I go to this stage, I forget everything what I should say. So sorry for that. But maybe let's start for introducing. So my name is Rafal. I'm the domain architect in the Electrolux. I love mobile. That's why I'm here. Backend as well, and I start to love the cybersecurity, who is typically pain off. I don't continue that word, but you know what I mean. So let's speak about the hexagonal architecture today. But the reason why we will speak about the hexagonal architecture, it's typically because probably every one of us have similar experience, and I use one key word for that experience, which is called deadlines. So even for us, Electrolux, we have exactly the same experience. Somebody come to us and say like, yeah, to the end of the year, you must to create the new feature. If that will be featured, I will be happy. But that's totally everything needs to be changed under hood. And you must to deliver it till the end of the December. And we have already December. So we typically have only 2 weeks to finish it. So our job was mostly like how to finish it, how typically make no super big mistakes. And obviously, there will be always a mistake during that developing time. But how to minimize the risk whenever something will be happen, you must to change the wheels and trying to find solutions, but not affecting the code so much. Then will be big kaboom stuff. So typically, we understand why we must to think about the architecture before it's too late. Okay, so that's the most topic that we want to speak, and how we solve that stuff in our situations, in our problems what we must to solve. I will just to tell you on the end how we solve it. Typically, how that was go. So when we speak about the architecture, we typically must to simplify the definitions. What exactly the architecture it is. So I will just to not go with all of the principle of the design patterns. Let's keep it today, okay? Because we don't have time for that. So how to simplify the architecture, the definition of architecture. So maybe I will do some exercise to you, okay, first. Please raise the hand if you use before the MVVM. That's good. More than half just to use it. That's amazing. MVP. That's good. As well, I will not raise the hand, but that's good. MVC. Everyone should raise the hand. It's the old school MVC. Viper. Something a little bit harder. That's good. Couple of you use it. Amazing. VIP. It's a little bit short version of the Viper. But if you use Viper, VIP you know as well. Redux. That's good. That's good. Amazing. So think about that architectures. Mostly with those who are most familiar, like MVVM, MVC. Take 10 seconds for something. Think about what you must to do to be able to implement MVVM, for example, MVC, VIP, doesn't matter. Think about that stuff. What they are created, what they need to be. So typically, if you have the answer already, you understand like the architecture is like some of the layers, you understand the existing layers, you understand what for the layers it is, okay, what the purpose of the layers is. And you start define what is the communications between those layers. So that's the most simplified definition of the architecture. Like you have the layers and you define the communications between the layers. So if we go back and try to think as an example, the MVVM. I choose the MVVM in the old way when we have the UI kit, who was the king on the Swift as well. And typically you have the controller, that's the layer, it exists. Nice, okay, we understand what flow it is, what purpose they have, and nada, all of that stuff. And now we understand they have some kind of the communication to the another layers. View model have to the another one, who is the model. We also understand some of the layers cannot communicate to each other. Like that one, model with the view. So typically, if we simplify the architecture, is the layers and the communications. So now the exercise part 2. Okay, take a breath. When you spoke about the MVVM, MVP, and all of them, even more probably, do you try to guess which of the layers is the common layer in all of them? what they are targeting typically. Ah, good, that's good. Amazing. Somebody can say model as well, because typically you have some entities model, but typically all of the architecture are focusing to the view itself. And that's the key point. That's now the problem. Like, if you think about the mobiles these days, it's typically different than we have about the mobiles 10 years ago or 5 years ago. When you are do backend development, maybe sometimes you can really see that some of the mobile apps, the code base of the mobile app is much more bigger than many of the backend servers. So how you wanna manage the code to be flexible? And that was happened to us. Like typically we have a lot of changes. We get that task until December, a couple years ago, not so far ago typically, and we must have that challenge. Typically we don't think about the UI anymore. So take a look about the code. And that code shows us the core of the problem. The code is correct. Don't try to find the issue there, okay? It's correct, the code. If you even start to think about your code, it's typically, okay, somebody can say like, yeah, my code is even worse. But it doesn't matter. It works, okay? It works how it's expected to work. But typically, if you think about the MVVM is mostly concentrated about the view, like you said. So some of the authors say even like all of the architecture pattern is the view architecture patterns. So when you see the MVVM, okay, that's nothing bad. That's totally correct. But the problem will be happen when you have some models which are a little bit bigger. And MVVM tell you nothing about how you should organize that code from that server, for example. There's nothing like that. There's nothing about the business logic. I don't tell you you must to create the Firebase service because it exists. But if your code base, your business logic will be the same amount of size, and take a look how much the Firebase have, and I show you only the folders, not the files inside, it's astronomically big. So how to solve it? If you want to use MVVM, you can forget. There's no way. Of course, you can. It's a challenge. You can do it, but you will be suffer if you have that task. You remember deadlines? So good luck. Good luck, typically. So one of the solutions what we can do is the hexagonal architecture. And hexagonal architecture is not something what we invented. It's very old architecture. It's 2005, I'm not mistaken. Mr. Alastar, we created it, invented it on the backend server. Typically, backend don't have the UI. That's why it was very, very promising, and it's worked. Mobile is much more bigger sometimes when we speak about the backend even. Some backend services are not so huge like mobile. So hexagonal architecture, typically, it's a good approach if you want to concentrate about your business logic, because hexagonal didn't focus about the UI. It doesn't mean you cannot use both. You can use the MVVM, but you want to create the models, what we saw on the previous slide, you must think differently. It's different approach, different target that you want to have. And hexagonal architecture will help you a lot with that. Also, hexagonal architecture, typically, it's much more easier creating your mindset how you want to interact with your externals. So let's say today your data you want to take from the file who is stored on your mobile. Or maybe your data is from the core data. Okay? Everyone loves core data, I know. But one day you want to switch and you want to take the data from the backend because you want to sync your data with maybe Android or anything, and whenever it will be. So because of that, hexagonal gives you more freedom. You don't change the business logic. You change only that external interactions, how it should be. And because of that hexagonal architecture, it's much more easier to scalability, the code. If you have 10 teams for one project, the scalability is very important. And the code structure is much more easier to understand, okay, where something belongs to. You saw the Firebase. When you have a lot of files, this is not easy part. So maybe let's take a look about the design for the hexagonal architecture. But before I will dive into it, a couple words like when you go to the nets or some blogs, you can find a lot of the diagrams, a lot of the designs. And typically all of the designs are named differently. Like some of the layers have different name. It's happened because design are different. Like people are maybe design something because of the code structure, maybe of the concept design. So they name it differently. What important is for us is like we understand the layers and we understand what for they are. Okay, so that's the core. Doesn't matter the name. I don't care even about the name. It's the most important what for the layers exist and how they communicate to each other. So in the hexagonal architecture, we have 3 layers. One of them, I call it domain. Sometimes you will find a different name like the applications, I think, or another one, doesn't matter. The domain typically is the layer who contains all of the business logic. But the business logic must be fully independent. So that means when you have even the models in that domain, I should be able to take the domain, put to another Xcode project, and everything should work. I should not see any warnings, any errors because you miss something. I don't care. I should not. Typically, it's hard to achieve, but it is doable. You can do it typically. So that's this domain. And we have another one who is the interface. Once again, naming can be different. I saw mostly from the backend developers like that interface, that layer, it's named as the applications. Once again, they're mixing something, but doesn't matter. From the mobile developers, the interface sometimes is named as a user interface, and that's correct. Every UI, what do you have? Every view models, what do you have? It's part of that layers. So whenever you want to present a little bit logic there, it's because of that. It's end up there. Another one is the infrastructure. So that, as we spoke before, like, okay, you don't know, you don't care typically. Domain don't care where and how I want to get the data. I want to get the data, okay? But infrastructure must implement, okay, I want to take it from the file or maybe from the backend, okay? So that's typically those 3 layers what exist. And as we say, we have also a definitions how they are communicate to each other. So the hexagonal architecture as well has something what they name the ports, okay? And ports, it's nothing more like just an interface. It's simply interface. You have the red one, okay, and the green. I don't understand the colors, but I think it's green. So typically, they have some different purpose of existence, okay? And that's only one difference, but typically it's just simply interface what you create. So on the left side, your left side, you have the ports who they call the input, and somebody call it as well like driving side. And it's typically like the user interface wanna start executing some business logic. So I wanna input something to the domain, okay? Do something to me. I want something from you. And when the domain wanna have something like communicate with the backend or whenever it will be, they have the output ports, okay? And this is the driving side. So we know so far, this is the interface, okay? Those stuff are the interface. But now, of course, with the interface, you cannot do too much. You must implement the interface. And that's the core difference between those 2 ports. So on the input ports, the implementation on the hexagonal terminology, they name it adapters. But typically, the input ports belongs to the domain, the interface, but also the implementation is part of that domain. So if I want to take the domain to another place, I take everything, implementation and the interface. But the output ports instead, the output ports interface belongs to the domain, but the implementation is not domain, okay? Implementation belongs to the infrastructure, so that gives you a more possibilities. If you want to switch the implementations from one to another provider, you don't care, okay? The business logic stay not touched, and you don't have to worry. So take a look about that design, and we just to jump to the code, I have some screenshots to you, but you know, it's 7 p.m. I know you are tired. It's even more than 7 p.m. So let's do it slowly. Take a look. Okay, we have domain, user, infrastructure, and so on, so on. Remember about the flow of control. If you are familiar with the clean architecture, they call it flow of control sometimes. So typically it's like it started from here, user interface, it's go through the port, okay, I wanna have business logic, blah, 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 nada, nada, I do something, and that domain speak with something if they need, okay? That's the flow of control. So the code, okay, like I say to you, I do it by purpose. Sometimes you will find the different, it's not the interface, it's applications, because the many diagrams on the internet have different names. So never focus about the name, focus about the functionality, what they present under hood. So that's my code, test code. It's maybe not part of the Electrolux, but I do it for you with my friends, so that's simplify, okay, all of the logic. You don't see too much code because of that. So we have the applications layer, okay, and the applications layer is typically what we say, UI, okay, and maybe if you want to use MVVM, so it's the view model as well. And as you see there, when I have the view model, okay, I want to do some interactions, okay. I want to speak with the domain. How? Because I have the interface. I don't put there the implementations of that interface. I speak through the interface. I have dependency injections by my old self, okay, maybe that's different annotations, but let's keep it at the moment, okay. We speak through the interface, and as you see, domain, input, ports, interface, okay? That's exactly where it's come from. So whenever I click the button, I want to execute some business logic, I jump to the another layers, and that layer is called domain, and now, as we said, it contains business logic, okay? Typically, its name sometimes depends of what are you reading, you know, use the use case, and many others, but that's your business logic. You have the ports, we have the interface of the inputs, we have the implementation of the inputs, but only interface of the outputs, okay? We can have also some kind of the models useful for that domain. And when you look the code, take a look at that one. That's the use case. So that's our business logic. Okay, it's that one. And that one automatically, my business logic, wanna implement my input interface. I use another, principle like the interface of the segregations. That way I have 3, not 1, but that doesn't matter. It's only small pieces of that. So you see the implementation already belongs to the domain. And now when I want to use something from the output ports, okay, yeah, it's no problem. I can use it. I don't know what is the implementations. I know what it should execute, okay, what I need. And I don't care who implement it. Somebody must do. But that doesn't matter for us. So whenever I will just execute something from that output interface, I will jump to the another infrastructure, another layers with the infrastructure. And typically it's like adapters, but adapter mostly from the output implementations. He can contain something extra, but I will jump to it later. But if you think about the output implementations, is that what we spoke, you see? That one was the interface defined, not there, but in the domain. And now I want to just to make implementation for that. But the infrastructure contains many more stuff, not only the adapters. It typically is like, somebody called me like it's a threshold. So you put everything else there, but it's not super true. But when you have any mobile configurations, it's go to the infrastructure. If you want to create another service, like maybe some tools, dependency injections, maybe some event dispatcher, whenever you want to create by yourself, you can put that stuff in the infrastructure. You can put the repositories, you can put some security implementations, and that's typically for that, okay? So it's purely isolate your business logic from anything else. Take a look a little bit more. And now, end of the story, what we started today. You remember that when I say like, it's December, somebody told us, let's implement something big. We have only 2 weeks for that. That was challenge. That's the real Electrolux code, is the KMM, what we are using. That code is used from the native iOS, typically. But as you see, even when we spoke about the authentications, and typically that was our task, we must to create a new authentications and authorizations. So it's not only a few lines of code, okay? It's a lot of lines of code. And typically you expect, okay, something can happen wrong. And it was happen wrong. We have a lot of the inputs. We have business logic there, okay? And we have a lot of the outputs, but it's too big, so I just to hide it, okay? It's not too many stuff. And now is the key. How you think, because in those 2 weeks, after 1 week, we have an issue, okay? Unexpected, like always. And we should switch from one provider, authentication provider. There is no joke, it's authentication, authorization provider. We don't speak about one API, okay? We switch from one authentication, authorization, out, in the short, provider to the another one. How long it takes if you follow that architecture? You can guess. How long it should take, or maybe you guess how long it takes. Come on, you must have some numbers. How you believe you will do it in the MVM? You can try like that.
Come on, give a guess.
2 hours.
With this implementation, I would say 2 to 3 hours based on the backend.
Almost that, yes. Typically, it was like 1 day, but 1 8-hour day work day is like 4 hours you drink coffee, after 4 hours you work. That's typically, okay? So if you just to narrow it, it's about like 1 day, so let's say 4 hours of pure coding and so on. That was so easily because we isolate purely everything what is from the implementations, external, okay, what should be given to us, and we focus only about the business logic. So all of the unit, UI test, everything was like go smoothly, boom, there was no changes. We have a beautiful structure, exactly what should be happening and what we expect. I don't care how, but I expect something like that will be happen. So because of that, it gives us a huge flexibility when we speak about the business logic. And it saves us because, the Google on the December have the freeze time as well. You know that, we forget that, and we have lucky. It was delivery on time. So that's typically what we have done on the Electrolux. Now, if you want to have some questions, I will try at least to answer. I don't swear I will be able, but I will try. And I have the red blocks. And I see one hand there. That was you. If you want still. Okay. Any questions? These closer there, just to use that one, okay?
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. One question I have, because this is something I've seen with backend people as well.
Yes.
How do you define your domain? Because if you get that wrong, all of your input ports also end up being wrong. And then it becomes a whole mess where you have wrong services, wrong domains, and then it becomes a mess.
Correct. I didn't want to, by special, go in that deeply because we target the DDD at the moment. So you must to isolate a concrete domain, define the concrete inputs, and if you want to have another domain, output communicate with the inputs of the another one. So it's everything typically how you define, how you design your domain, and after that, it's simply, typically. If you start coding, without the thinking about what you are coding, okay, so you are typically on the bad situations. But everything starting from, okay, how I define what is my domain, how I should cover, what I should cover. And that will go smoothly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is on the back, if you can show to that gentleman.
You're strong enough. 1 throw, if not 2 throws.
I'm not really comfortable with that.
Good catch. Good catch.
Good throw, nice catch.
Nice one. Other than the input and output terminology here, I can see very big similarities between that architecture and the clean architecture. Even like
Of course.
the inside and the other layers outside.
Of course.
So how can you define if there are any differences or?
So I have another presentation about those differences, but it's longer. It's like 1 hour. But typically, if you go to the history, Hexagonal 2005, okay, the Onion 2008, and Clean 2012. Okay, so typically you see like the Clean architecture was created after the Hexagonal architecture, And when you go to the Uncle Bob, okay, Martin, I don't know his full name, he say the clean architecture is a philosophy. So typically, philosophy is mean, okay, I understand some principle and some rules why I should go or not to go. And hexagonal, just to implement that philosophy. So there is not super like, okay, how you can compare. Okay, it finalize some philosophy and follow it, because clean was later than hexagonal, okay, that's typically. But the difference is between hexagonal and onion, who is mostly compared to each other, because of that, on one of the side, I show you like where you put the implementations. I don't want to go deeply because we need to go to the clean architecture, what is the borderline, so typically what is the polymorphism, who have the interface and who have the implementations. So the big difference is typically where you implement something and when you create the interface, so how you cross the boundaries. Typically safely, not safely, that's a different story, but I have 1 hour for that, so I will not answer you by 5 words, sorry for that, but.
Thank you.
Good.
Thanks for the great presentation. So I would just like to ask, so if we modularize this whole architecture, for example, we have domain package, we have interface package,
Yes.
services and repositories. So if we have some entities that we would like to use in the presentation or in the UI, how would you like to use that?
Very
Because
good
we
questions.
don't want to import the whole domain package in presentation.
Absolutely, you cannot. Typically, domain is totally untouchable from the outsider. So when you have the models, you mean that's my model inside my domain. So if you are familiar with the data transfer object on the backend or data access object, that's the answer, typically. So when you have your full mobile apps, you also must define what area you're targeting. If you speak about the UI, you have there. Business logic there. So models from the UI can be totally different than models from your domain. So now is the time how you want to transfer one to the another. Typically, I saw also solutions like people use that model from the domain, but if the project will be bigger and bigger, okay, good luck with the maintaining all of that stuff. So you must take the consequence if you want to transfer those models to the another layers. It is doable for the small apps, but for the bigger one, it's better to create a DTO between.
This is pretty similar to my project that I'm working on. So we have what's called a different package just for public
Yes,
and
yes.
portable scenarios. So what we do in the presentation, because we have different presentations, so we just inject in one
Can-
place, and in all UI and presentation, we just import that
Can be.
interface package because we don't want to import all that domain.
That's a good answer as well. The Uncle Bob also told that stuff. Some of the entities can cross the boundaries, but the anemic one don't cross the rich entities for that. But that's a good answer. Yeah, that approach what you do.
Great, thanks.
Sure. Any more questions, or we out of the time?
For one more.
Yeah, see if
Last
anyone.
question, anybody? Of course, last question.
I think this volunteer,
Can I ask just one question?
please.
Thank you for the presentation. So how long does it take for a new person to get introduced to this architecture?
So it depends of the level of the people. Like we have the junior, we have the middle, we have the senior.
Junior.
Can you repeat?
Let's say junior. developer.
Junior. So it's typically like how we want to learn junior. The MVVM is like the same school. So MVVM for the beginners is like for me a couple years ago, maybe more than a couple years ago, like, okay, what is that? I don't know. I just to copy paste. I don't know it. But if you have only 3 layers, it's only 3 layers. You can also say like, okay, don't cross that line and don't cross that line. And you should be fine. But you must really understand the purpose why you do it. And if you understand the purpose why you do it, it will be much easier to even teach the junior, saying like, that is that, that is that, that is that. Okay, don't cross the line, we'll be fine. After the weeks, you will learn why, but at least you will not cross the line. I think it's the same like you will learn anything else. It's very simple architecture.
All right. Thank you very much, Rafal.
Thank you.